Hey mamas, and welcome to the Entering Motherhood podcast. I'm your host, Sarah Marie Bilger, a birth and postpartum doula who is passionate about helping women enter motherhood feeling informed, supported, and empowered. Join us every episode to learn from professionals, special guests, and moms just like you, ensuring that you know what you need to know and discover things that you didn't know before. I believe in you. Let's doula this and let's navigate the transition of entering motherhood together. In this episode, we chat with Chelsea Ann about feminine empowerment and conscious motherhood. Chelsea shares her journey from being a labor and delivery nurse who specifically trained with midwife Ina May Gaskin to later becoming an integrative health practitioner. She reflects on how her divorce and personal struggles with motherhood led to her rediscovery of her authentic feminine energy. She challenges societal pressures on women, addresses generational patterns of manipulation and insecurity, and encourages mothers to reconnect with their intuition. She offers some really practical tools for designing and nurturing a life that's aligned with your true feminine nature. And this episode was just so deep. I really enjoyed recording it, and I know that you're going to get so much out of it and that you're going to enjoy it as well. So let's get this episode started and listen in on this conversation. Hello and welcome to Entering Motherhood. I'm super excited to have you here and get this conversation started. But before we do, how about you go ahead and introduce yourself for the listeners?
Hi, Sarah. My name is Chelsea Ann. I am a mother. I work with women. I've been working with women in the clinic for 16 years. I was a labor and delivery nurse, and then I went on to train with Ina May Gaskin, a very famous midwife, and she changed the trajectory of my life, sort of. And I thought, there's got to be a different way to do this. So I personally had 2 home births, and then I became a nurse practitioner. And from then I studied integrative medicine, went to work in reproductive medicine. Now I work with women in women's health and menopause transitions. So I'm focused on helping women transition through these big events in their life, and I love it. And then I'm also an author. So I've written 5 books. In the mornings, I've just woken up and written. I'm just very good at it and I love it. And my most recent books, I think we're going to be talking about today, are The Feminine Effect and The Feminine Frequency. And really, they focus on conscious motherhood. And so that's my passion, and that's what I speak about.
Yeah, I love that. I think there was so many parallels in your writing and in what has kind of like occurred and happened in my life personally. Our first, when she was born, I was a mechanical engineer working very male dominated field. And now I do birth and postpartum doula work. I very much am like in that feminine field and just like around women more. My first birth ended up in a cesarean. My last was a home birth. So it's like this huge shift that like I see personally, and it was fun to read and see how you articulated a lot of just like culturally what's happening, how we're kind of like flowing in these different directions and just like bringing awareness to it. So let's kind of like backtrack and go into your motherhood experience and then dig a little bit deeper into how you were saying like you were a labor and delivery nurse and then you were working with Ina May and just what that experience was like.
Yeah. So I had a very interesting story, quite a life, and I wrote about this in The Feminine Effect. But basically, I ended up going through a divorce. And I'm going to start with that because there takes something in your life that requires you to change. And maybe, in the patients I see in the clinic, it might be an autoimmune issue or thyroid problem. Maybe it's a spiritual breakdown or the breakup of a relationship. You get sick mentally, emotionally, physically, or spiritually. So I had to go hit my rock bottom, and I met this man named Abdi Electricite, first in Egypt and then worked with him in Costa Rica. And you'd think, this random man, what would he teach me? And I went to him and I said, can you heal me? I'm at my rock bottom as a mother. I'm a single mother right now. I went from being in a very, very wealthy family, having everything you think in the world, to really wanting to find my soul. Like, what is wrong? What am I chasing? I have all these degrees. I have everything. Like, what am I chasing? Why am I not getting this right? And he looked at me and he said, you're not in your nature. And we're in the middle of the jungle and the rain is pouring down just like a movie. And I said, what is my nature? What are you talking about? And so that's where this journey really begins. And there's different aspects of it spiritually, emotionally, and physically. But I had to lose a lot. I had to lose a lot of my outward identities. I had to stop looking to society to define who I was and define what's right or wrong for me. I had to redefine my values, and I had to find my authentic nature, which means everything you're conditioned to believe is true from your family or from where society isn't. So you basically start this shedding process, and then you go back to who you are as a mother. And for me, my authentic nature was motherhood. I can't, I would just, at the end of the book, I'm sitting on the beach with my children and I'm like, nobody can take this away from me because it's what God gave me. And I'm much better at it now. And I'm much less selfish. And so that's my journey in teaching women, is like what your nature is, what it is not, and how do you get there?
Yeah. So you had been working with Ina May before your children, correct?
Okay,
Yeah.
back to Ina May
Yeah.
Gaskin. Yeah, so she is a great example. So I went and stayed at the farm with her, and she had a movie on her. So she was holding my hand one night. She held my hand for like 2 hours, and I was like, what is going on here? Something's happening, but I didn't understand it till later. And if I look at Ina May's work, she basically saved birth in the Western world. It was being completely eliminated if you look at what she did. So it was, women were being caged. They were being separated from the males. They were being told that, Pitocin is safe. They were being put on monitors. And back, down in Brazil now, birth is like, I think it's like 90 something percent cesarean rate. So something that was sacred was completely forgotten within the Western world. And someone had to come along and say, don't forget. Don't forget this exists. Let's write it down in time. We're almost forgetting. So Ina May, for me, was the first person that I recognized that was helping women remember their power and their authenticity. And that's exactly what these books I write are about. The Feminine Effect and the Feminine Frequency is, don't forget what it means to be a woman in a world that's trying to make you forget your power, what success is, your intuition, your connection. Like, the world is trying to tell us it's more powerful to be a man. It's tricking us, just like Eve was tricked, just like it, because we're gullible. And so what she did in time, like what Ina May really truly did, was take the glasses off of women if they're wearing blue glasses and say, here's red glasses. There's no fear. There's nothing but love. This is how we can do it. And she helped everybody remember. And that's why she was remembered.
Yeah. And so how did that affect how you birthed and how you were like bringing your children into this world?
So for her, that was energetic transference. It can happen in a negative way, which I talk a lot about in Feminine Frequency. It can happen, which we can jump into later, but it can happen in a positive way. So if you have a very powerful woman that's in her heart, connected to the divine, very connected, and understands her authenticity, is not afraid to say or be who she is, she can transfer that energy on to other women without having to say anything. It just occurs because she's there, and maybe she's teaching you something about delivering a baby breech. It had nothing to do with that. It had to do with what I'm talking about. Like, she taught me, don't let society tell you what to do. So anyway, I was working in labor delivery, and I was working, oh my gosh, I was working at a hospital in LA. I think I did 4 births a day, and I was thrown in. They're like, here you go. And I was just like, you deliver the baby. Kind of, it was just so busy. And then I went to UCSF, which is one of the top tier hospitals you can work at in the country. And I was training, like, it's a training hospital. And so it's a great job. Mostly only nurse practitioners there. It was an awesome place to train. And I went back from studying with Ina May Gaskin, which they paid me to go there, which was wonderful. And I told everyone I working with, I said, I'm going to have a home birth. And they said, we'll see you soon. We'll see you here. You're going to be a transfer. You're going to, you're going to be a transfer. And I said, no, a home birth is what I need to do right now to understand my power. So I guess if I think about it, these various things I've done is to understand my power as a woman and as a mother. And so I did it at home. I did both of them at home, and I didn't get transferred. And then I realized I couldn't do the job anymore because it went against my values and my integrity.
Yeah. Yeah. And then your divorce had come after your children.
Much later, yes,
Yeah.
yes. Yeah,
Yeah.
so my divorce came much later, and that's a whole nother story, but that's the book of the Feminine Effect. That's like,
Yeah.
so then it goes into when you begin to go out of your nature as a woman. So I guess in my life I've vacillated between understanding what your nature is as a woman and what it is not in these various experiences, which I've documented in various books. And so it doesn't matter to me how you birth your baby, but in those moments, if you're going to try to avoid pain, you can't in birth. You can't avoid it. Like cesareans are much more painful after. Going through natural birth is much more painful during, and if you don't heal
Mhm.
yourself and your generational wounds, they're going to come up before you give birth or they're going to come up after. And so that you have to, if you want to be a conscious mother, there's going to be a time that you either have to consciously clear yourself before birth or you can do it after. And so when I had my daughters, when I had Sage, I called my friends and I said, nobody taught me this. Nobody taught me how to be a good mother. And so I wrote it down. I was like, how do we teach women this? I don't know that many books that teaches these things. I don't know that many books that teaches true femininity. Ina May was famous because that's what she was teaching. She
Mhm.
was mothering us. She was teaching us, don't forget how to birth. And so what these books are is like, don't forget how to be a mother. Don't pass those generational patterns onto your children like we've seen from our mothers. How can we change?
Yeah, I think it is like one of those things like how we mother is mostly like, how our mothers mothered. And then that is like generationally like passed on, or you see like how a mother mothers or like something like that. And so like it's not widely expressed or talked about. So most of the time, like we do feel lost in this, or there's just like this like big overlap of like society just pushing and telling you how to rather than giving you the power and saying, like lean into your intuition and really, figure out like what that means for you. And so, yeah.
Yeah. And well, society's pushing women to go to work for 40 to 60 hours a week and leave their children. And so and society is saying, education, more cars, more houses, more buying more things. This is more important. So you need to have two jobs. So when feminism is a great thing, and that's what I question in this book, but feminism said, defined power and defined success based on financial success. And so for women to have independence, they had to always make more money. So now we base success as women based on how much money we're making and if we're independent enough. So now that independence is kicking ourselves in the butt because I see so many women that are like, I'm independent, I'm these sort of things, but I'm still unhappy. The carrot
Mhm.
is always dangling. What is wrong? And I can give you some, examples of when my whole story's in The Feminine Effect. If anybody wants to read it, it's like a movie. It plays out like that and it's a great ending. But it's a difficult if you're feeling like, what is wrong with my life? I can't pinpoint what it is. It's likely that you don't know what your feminine nature is and you're looking to find that again.
Yeah, so can you kind of then like unravel that a little bit more and say like how you feel the feminine nature is?
Absolutely. Let me give you an example because I think
Okay.
people learn from stories. So I had a client and she's now so happy in her motherhood. And I asked her, I said, I couldn't remember because I worked with her for so long. And just, remind me, I was like, why are you so happy in your motherhood right now? She's ecstatic. She's healing. She looks, a woman that she's like glowing and, like, she has time for herself and she's balanced and the creativity. And I said, how did you get that? And because I'd
Mhm.
work with her, I was like, what did we do to get there? And remind me what our steps were. And she goes, don't you remember that I was working 50 hours a week? I was pregnant. I was infertile at the time. I couldn't get pregnant when I started working with you. I was trying to take care of my kid, but handing her to a nanny. I had autoimmune issues. My hair was falling out. I was gaining and losing weight. My parents were suing me. I was about to lose my house. She goes, I had complete chaos in my life. And I said, what did we do? Remind me so I can teach this because I do it so intuitively with people. And
Mhm.
what the best way to describe it is I had to teach her what conditioning is from her childhood. So conditioning is what you are programmed with physically, in your physical environment and from society. And when you don't know what that is, you have to sort of ask other people to judge you from the outside to say, this is how you act and this is your pattern. And then it's very hard to directly change your conditioning. So if you're conditioned to be successful and work 40 hours and your parents told you that's what you have to do, it's very hard to change that to balance motherhood. So basically, you have to take space in your life and you have to take space in your decisions. So say if you're conditioned to always be challenged, like a lot of women are, or maybe even conditioned to never change, in each moment where you're about to choose challenge, you're about to choose chaos, you have to catch yourself and say, I'm doing it again. Wow, like I'm about to choose chaos. And then if you choose chaos or you choose challenge in a relationship, great, then you know you did it again. And then the next time you see you're doing it and you become more aware, just like Eckhart Tolle teaches, like there's a presence in the moment and you can choose the same pattern. But basically, she had to see over time that these patterns from her childhood and patterns from society were just getting reproduced in her life. And so we had to take a step back. She stopped the infertility treatments.
Mhm.
She got pregnant naturally. She quit her job for a period of time. And then she realized her authentic nature and her power came from healing the generational patterns. So she kind of redefined. So, number one, she redefined what success was for her. Number two, she found her authenticity. And then she redefined what power was for her, which was when healing motherhood, like healing her generational, patterns. And that became more important than her job.
Yeah, there's so much to that, and sometimes it really is just stepping back and taking time to figure out, like, what am I doing?
Yeah.
And, is this what I want to be doing, and is this feel right? Because I think a lot of times there is like, you can feel it. You can feel like, something's gotta give, and work there's just, like, always this, like, imbalance. And so I think, like, when you can be more in that authentic state, whatever it is for you, you do feel that balance. You feel that, equilibrium in how you're experiencing it.
Sarah, that's exactly the difference is that it's not about thinking because when you're thinking, you're going to do what society told you to do is right because you're going to feel a lot of guilt and a lot of shame, and the ego doesn't want to feel that. So it's going to
Mm.
do everything to do what everybody tells you is right, so you don't feel guilt and shame that you're doing something different, right? But the true authenticity and power comes from not doing what you think everybody else wants you to do, doing what's right for you. And it's usually based, not usually, for a woman and her femininity, it's based on what she feels. And so if people come into your environment, so back to the feminine frequency, which was the book I wrote after The Feminine Effect. It's a series of books on the same subject, but different ways of saying it. And the feminine frequency is 27 sections. So it's super easy to pick up and read. You can read it section by section, but it's what a woman is not, what a woman is, and then how do and then how do you get there? And from that, I looked at in our culture, there's this phenomenon of talking about narcissism. And I am wondering, and I looked into why do we have so much of it? And then I
Mm.
look at a lot of unhealthy mothers versus very healthy mothers. And there's not that many very healthy mothers. So we're trying to redefine that, right? And so what a healthy mother is not. And I believe that this rise and uptick in narcissism and the talk about of manipulation, entitlement, lying, jealousy, envy, this isn't natural for a woman. And so what I kind of argue in this book is that we've taken on these battle traits. This is the way that a woman battles to be in a world where she feels in survival in order to compete with men and women. So instead of and maybe they were traits that are always in men but they're more like, it's like we've taken traits that you would have on a battlefield and made it emotional, where true emotion is empathy, compassion, putting yourself in another person's perspective. And we're inverting that. And this is cultural phenomenon that keeps getting passed on through each woman to males and females from each generation and not really getting cut off. So how do we identify it and change it? So that's what whole nother subject, but very much around motherhood because a lot of us had a lot of unhealthy mothers.
Yeah, and that just made me remember too, in your book, you mentioned dim people. Can you kind of explain, like, what that is and how, like, being in that energy of people can affect us?
Well, yeah, this is so the word toxic, it creates separation. So it's used a lot. And I think social media is a tool for darkness to separate you. So you go into your mind and it's like me and that person are separate, right? And what unity really is and what love feels like when you're in your heart and harmony is you can put yourself in someone else's shoes and then you can change your perspective to see how they feel, right? But in this culture of more toxicity, I had to rename the name toxicity. And so I understood, like, what does it mean? And for me, it was like a dimming of your light and it wants to take you into that separateness. And so I took the word dim and I said, what are these people? Well, they're desperate because they're trying to often, create conflict or chaos within someone's life. And we have a lot of more women like this now. I meet them all the time and I'm very shocked by it. It's in the workplace and it's in families, and it's creating stress and then ignorance, which is they just don't know that they're doing it. So they can't see it. They can't see it, that it isn't feminine, that it's very masculine. And then they're also manipulative. They're manipulating themselves and they're manipulating reality. And really, women manipulate because they don't know how powerful they are. So manipulation is really because one person feels more powerful than the other. So the one that doesn't feel as powerful cannot attack directly. So they have to do things on the side to be more powerful. So if women knew their true power, and then society didn't take that away from them, they would have no reason to act this way because there would be no reason to lie. They're lying to themselves, manipulating themselves, and then it comes out into culture. Does that
Yeah.
make sense?
Yeah, yeah. I think it's a lot of like how you said too. It's like we don't know that we're doing it sometimes. And it's a lot of this like survival, like defense mechanisms, things that have like built up. And we're trying to counteract, other people around us and just like figure out how to interact. And I think it's, with the manipulation, like sometimes it's a little intentional and like other times you don't know that you're necessarily like doing it. But like you said, like when we can kind of just be like, hey, like I don't need to manipulate to like put my point across. I can just flat out say it and own that and be like, hey, like this is what's happening. I think a lot of times too it's like when we're becoming a mother and we have these maybe like rules or things in place that we want like our family unit to kind of follow and things like that. We don't have to, like lie about it or like be like discreet about it. Like we can just say like, hey, these are, what we feel is working best for our family, even with like home birth and stuff. I
Yeah.
think a lot of the times we can feel like that shame and guilt and that we're doing something wrong when it's really just what we want to do and it's different than what a lot of other people are experiencing or have experienced. And
Yeah.
so it's like we feel like we have to almost like, flip the script or like say it nicely or something like that. Whereas like instead we can really just be like, hey, like this is how I feel, like this is what is important to me and like this is what we're doing moving forward. And we don't have to feel like that shame and guilt around it.
Well, Sarah, all that comes, like everything you're saying, it comes from a secure mother. And so in my book, I had looked at all these aspects of the woman. And one of the sections, which I think is one of my best sections, I looked at what insecurity is. Like, why are we having, and this will tie back into manipulation because it all really stems from this.
Mhm.
And I was wondering, like, well, what is insecurity? Why do we have it? And then you have to kind of question, well, why do we, what's security? Why do we need security? Where did it come from? And if you look at the definition of security, it really comes ancient of needing a man and having this balance between the masculine and feminine, where a woman would feel secure with a man under the protection and provision of those. That's where we came up with it in society. Okay. And now, because of where we're at, we don't need men. Right. But now we have more widespread insecurity within women. And so what's happening with not needing men and the dependency between the masculine and the feminine and the needing of that family unit is getting split, right?
Mm.
And then men really need women, but women, we're not seeing our dependency upon each other. So then if a woman is insecure, which is another whole subject, another podcast, right, to really understand the masculine and feminine needing each other. But if a woman is insecure, she will pass that insecurity particularly onto her female children.
Mm.
And then if she's insecure, she's going to be manipulative because she doesn't ever know her own power and she's going to lie a lot. And you can think of it within your family system like a terrorist, it creates like bombs of upheaval. If you have like a mother-in-law, for example, that really wants to get her way and doesn't think of other people's way, that's a great example, right? How does that create chaos in your family and pass on to every generation so that the daughters then learn, oh, to get my way, I have to do it this way. To get my way, I have to learn to lie. And then they don't understand that just what you're saying is if they saw a mom that knew who she was, knew that she could depend on a man, knew that people are safe, it's such simple dynamics, but it changes everything.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Like you said, like it is like, or it should be such like simple
It's such
dynamics.
simple dynamics,
But
but
it
yeah.
can change everything, and it really can like throw things like a lot off balance when like that like simplicity is just like not occurring.
Yeah, it's like, and that's what authenticity is. It's like the more authentic you become, and well, let me talk about myself. I don't know about anybody else. The more authentic I've become, the simpler my life became.
Mm.
And then it can change in moments that it becomes like complicated where I'm doing trips or I'm doing those things, but I can handle it. Nothing stresses me out now. There's an intuition, there's a knowing, there's a trust. There's all these values, trust, intuition, goodness, graciousness, grace, all those words come in rather than these other, I guess, more dim words, such as like lying or chaos or the mental or physical emotional breakdown. Like my friend I was talking about from the beginning, a friend, well, she's now a friend, but my client who had her life falling apart when she began to take space and she began to tap into what she feels and she began to tap into her own intuition, which, through time and actually leaving her job for a period of time, she now has all those words, like the court case went away. She won, harmony can return into your life because your heart's open and you begin to feel. And then you can put yourself in your children's shoes of like, well, how do they feel when I'm working 60 hours a week? And that's a way to do it. If you're a mom that's listening right now and you're like, I feel all these things, but I don't even know how to begin. Like, where do I freaking begin? Well, close your eyes and put yourself in your children's shoes of how they experience their day to day life and see if that's okay, how you would want them to experience it and how they experience you. And this may take you weeks at time in the mornings or at night to like honestly like leave your body in a funny way and enter them and see how they experience it. And would that be the best way for them to grow up? Are you proud of that? Is that going to create their future the way you want it? And that's how you tap into your own intuition. And then there's so many ways of doing it, but that's one of them.
Yeah, yeah, and I feel like it can look different for everybody. For my journey specifically, like, I did leave that, long hours,
Yeah.
corporate work, male-dominated field. I felt off, and it was, affecting my day-to-day. It was how I wanted to be around my kids. Maybe other people don't necessarily feel like that, but, like, I really feel like there is something to it when we have that time and that freedom and that space to really sit with it and, like you said, like, put ourselves in our children's perspective and just see what's happening and how things are occurring and just say, like, "Is this how I want to continue?" And I
Yeah.
think, like, a lot of times people feel, like, stuck or feel like, "Oh, I have to do this. I have to work the long hours. I have to, like, not see my kids," and, like, there's a lot of this, like, need to, have to philosophy that I think if you really want things to change, you can find a solution. And I think it's just a matter of kind of, yeah, like a slow process,
Mm-hmm.
but you can get there.
It is a slow process, and it will require changing your identity. And it's a massive identity shift, and it's a massive change in the perspective of what you think powerful is. And so if you can redefine what success is for you I think success in the book, it's defined as, being in your nature. So like I feel I have learned that the more feminine I have become, I can see the future that I'm like, I dream it, like
Mm,
the magical things that occur around me is just out of control, like it's an energetic frequency that just occurs. And I don't want to talk about that because it can go very woo woo, but you can tell me if a guy making, and I actually make more money now than I ever did because it's a frequency, right? Everything shifts in a different way. Now, you could tell me a guy going to Manhattan every day and walk into an office, is that more powerful than me? I don't know. Defines how you perceive power. But it really comes down to, is power based on what you think or based on what you feel? And so when I was doing a lot of meditation, I thought it was powerful, and I remember when I met this man, Abdi, he does the teachings with me in these books. He's like the male aspect of the feminine. Like we go back and forth, which you really do need both. And he looked at me one day and he goes, "You're only halfway up the mountain." And I was like, what do you mean? Like, I'm at the top. And he's like, you're not at the top at all. And I didn't understand what he meant until my heart opened. And so when I had to go through this heart opening process, which is a critical part of the femininity, like opening, I think it'll happen for humanity. And maybe it's for my friend, it happened through her parents suing her and her autoimmune issue. For me, it was through my divorce and seeing a perspective of my ex-husband. Other people, it'd be somebody dying or losing their job. It's this part you have to sort of break, and then you have to have your heart open and you look at the parts of yourself that closed. So perhaps it was like it is always from your mother or your father. Something happens in your childhood that basically puts a cover of protection around your ego so that you can't really feel or experience the world based on reality. You take on these forms like manipulating reality or entitlement or envy or jealousy, and they become your identity, though those aren't the truth. And so your mind can be cleared by meditation, but then your heart has to be open to love through feeling pain. It's a process. And it's like the process of like healing women and mothers, in my opinion, so that they don't pass their pain from their family onto their children. Because if you don't feel the pain of all these other generations, I know it really sounds really out there, but like the ones that are really changing their family, totally cutting off those past, karmic ties, are the ones that are feeling everything and saying, "Oh wow, we did it way wrong, and this isn't going to come into my house."
Yeah. And I think, like there's so much there, and there's just all the books that you've written, and just like the things that you've, been able to articulate is something that, I think is really important just to just bring awareness to, like, as you're entering this motherhood stage, and just, raising children, and trying to have that like conscious awareness of what I want this to look like. And I think it is like an important part, and like our responsibility to learn some of these things, and to, yeah, like pass them down or rewrite like things, and really draw more attention to that. So, what would be something that you would really want somebody who is in this early, like maybe they're pregnant now, or like early motherhood stage, like what would you want them to really know, or begin to understand when talking about like a lot of this?
Let's just talk about work, what we've kind of focused on today. If you're trying to decide, am I going to work? Should I stay with my kids? Should I do what society tells me? Like, I know that if we just cut back, I could just stay home. But, is that enough? Like there's this thing of like, I have to do it. I have to do it. Like, this is what I'm supposed to do. Draw a house, take a piece of paper, and draw a house, because women dream in houses and houses represent consciousness. And then draw out all the rooms. It's like, this is just the beginning. And I'll tell you which books you can read to go where you are. But like what does so if I was going to design a house, so my passion is designing. I should have been a designer, but I'm not. I'm a writer. Like, I love wallpaper and colors and like smells and cooking. And I just think it's so fun. Right. So I was like, we all think that's great. Let's pretend we're all designers and we're going to design our life, right? So what does your house feel like? And this is not what you're dealing with right now. Like, let's do the ultimate of manifestation of like, what does it feel like? What does it look like when you walk into that house? What are the colors that you feel? When you go into your kitchen, what does it taste like? And when you hear the sounds, like, where are your children playing? Are you home? Or is there a nanny home in your home? Is there a housekeeper? Who's taking care of the kids? Like, look at your life within this house. And when you go out into nature in your garden, and I often describe women in the elements. So I can describe all these books of how this all ties together, all my books tie together. But basically fertility, fire, air, earth, water, ether are also broken down into emotions on the internal and the external. So when you go into your garden, like, what are the colors? Is it storming outside? What kind of weather do you like? That sounds crazy, but when you start to break it down, that's beginning to tap into the feminine using colors, textures, tastes. Let's take an example of someone like Alicia Keys. Okay. She's powerful because she follows her heart as a woman and artistic, and she looks like a woman. She feels like a woman. Her art is like that. So then you look at that and you look at where you're at. And then you take the steps to design your life. And that I work with women on how to do this and where's the process, but each of my books tells you how to do it. So Mystical Motherhood is 40 steps, to conscious motherhood from the big, from conception to birth, to postpartum, to the early childhood years using Maslow's hierarchy. And then in Fertile, I take women through this conscious conception process. And what do you epigenetically program your child with in the womb? How do you bring in these senses? How do you bring in the colors, and how do you change? And then the feminine effect, it's through the power of a story. And then the feminine frequency, it's like through the power of a nonfiction, like this is exactly what you could do, day by day where you're at. But begin by drawing your house out of what it feels like in the house that you design and what your children would experience in that house. And then take some space to feel like how you can get there.
Yeah, I love that. I love just being more creative and having that visualization
Yeah.
and having something to really lean into and go for. I think definitely helps. I think visualizations, just being more creative, maybe even just you haven't been creative in a long time and you haven't had that aspect of your life to really just flow and see what happens, writing or drawing or
Yeah.
making little pictures and things like that. So I definitely agree with that. And I think when we're more creative, we're more feminine and we have that artistic ability to really visualize and internalize that.
Well, I bring up the houses because we're so in our society, we're banking, we're going the professions I see where the women are the sickest are bankers and lawyers always. And then it goes down into I could name it all off. And I have half my friends are bankers, I half my friends are lawyers, I have, but there's a lack of connections to what makes the feminine, which is touch, sound, taste, color, smell, design, intuition, all of these things which then tap into this it's like a circle. It's not a square, right?
Mhm.
And so when you don't tap into all that power, there's so much power in that. And that's just the beginning. But in my books, I describe that that's really, if you're going to design your conscious child in the womb, which I do a lot on epigenetic work with women also when I work with them privately, but what are they experiencing in the womb? You have to put yourself into the child's experience. Yeah.
Awesome. Is there anything else that we haven't talked about that you would really want to just reiterate or just mention?
Yeah, I think the most important thing is if motherhood is there's really nothing more important. And I don't think you have to have children necessarily to be a mother. I
Mhm.
think that motherhood comes in so many forms. I have half my friends don't have children and they're very motherly. It comes from what we're talking about, from this connection and from this ability to say that society may be doing it wrong and that I'm going to do it differently. And in that, I'm choosing a more powerful road. And it's okay if you choose motherhood. And hopefully my work one day, my goal by the time I die is hopefully that I can teach women that it's very powerful to choose motherhood. And in Western society, we don't think that right now. And so if that can change, just like Ina May could change that, you can do natural birthing. If we could have a movement towards that, I think that it would change family systems for humanity.
Yeah. Awesome. Cool.
Yeah.
So where can we find you, get in contact with you? How
Yeah.
can we get your books? Tell us all the details.
Yeah, so you can go to Chelsea Ann Effect. I actually work with private clients all the time. And then I also am a practitioner. I did integrative medicine, reproductive medicine, so fertility clinics, you name it, women's health. So I work as a practitioner in New York and in California, so I can do that. And I'm working in menopause right now, which I'm really loving. But you can work with me privately. You can buy all my books on Amazon, and Feminine Effect and Feminine Frequency are also in bookstores. Wherever you are in life, you can tap into one of the books that will take you there. So again, Chelsea Ann Effect, and I'd love to meet you all.
Awesome. Well, thank you so
Yeah.
much. This has been great.
Thank you so much, Sarah. I appreciate it.
Thank you, mamas, so much for listening. Remember, you are a rock star. I believe in you. Let's doula this. Let's crank it up a notch and let's kick it into high gear together. Hit that subscribe button, share this episode with a friend, message me, email me, call me, beat me. You know how to reach me. We're doing this, mamas. I am so excited to catch you here next week. This is your one-stop go-to place for helping you find the resources you need to make the best choices for you and your family during pregnancy, birth, and most importantly, postpartum. See you later, mamas.